Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the afternoon session of the Katagalan Forum. Now we will proceed to the panel discussion 2 titled The Challenges and Impact of Information Warfare, Cognitive Warfare, and Other Gray Zone Tactics on Democracy. There are 5 panelists in this session, respectively from Israel, Poland, Lithuania, USA, and the Republic of China, Taiwan. It is my pleasure to introduce our moderator of this session, Mr. Jason Zhixing Liu, the former advisor of Asia-Pacific Information Integrity Program of National Democratic Institute. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome.
Hi, dear colleagues. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I hope you all enjoy your lunch and your insightful conversation with the colleagues. And most importantly, I hope you all had your coffee with you. Welcome to this session of the forum, where today we will delve into the challenges and impact of information warfare, cognitive warfare, and other gray zone tactics. I think we all know in this era of rapid technological evolution and then globalization of information, conflicts no longer remain confined to battlefield. They permeate our screens, influence our perception, and sow doubt in the minds of people. This new kind of warfare is subtle, persistent, and often unattributable. Today, we will hear perspective from our 5 distinguished panelists from 5 countries. They are very important experts in the field, senior officials, and policymakers. In these sessions, we will firstly invite each speaker to share their knowledge, insights, and their ongoing projects tackling the issue. But following that, if time allows, we are more glad to take questions from the audience. Without further ado, let's firstly welcome our panelists on the stage. Please join me with rounds of applause to say hi to our panelists. Firstly, we have Director Isaac Ben Israel from the Center of ICRC, Tel Aviv University. The director is also the chairman of the Israel Space Agency, the chairman of Israel National Council for R&D, and also we have Professor Jakub Buchak. She's professor of Mann School of Fire Service and advisor at Governance Center of Security. Third, we have Mr. Williams Samaska. He's the member of the Parliament of Lithuania. He's also the member of Parliamentary Group of Relations with Taiwan in the Parliament. And we'll welcome Elizabeth Bao Yi Li. She's Senior Fellow at the American Enterprise Institute. And last but not least, we have Professor Puma Shen, Shen Boyang 老师. He's the Associate Professor of National Taipei University. He's also the Chairperson of Daffodil Lab and the Dean of Kuma Academy in Taiwan. Now let's invite our first speaker to speak. Let's welcome Director Isaac Ben Israel. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for inviting me here. I don't have to tell this educated audience that misinformation, disinformation, so-called nowadays information warfare is a very old thing done. I mean, it's as old as history, more or less, history of warfare. The only thing that changed is the method. I mean, in previous times, you had to use rumors, lies spread from one man to another man, almost manually, etc. But with modern technology, you can do it at a much larger scale and also much faster. This is the exponential growth of technology, which makes it more dangerous in a way. And this is what I'm going to talk about. Now, if we speak about threats against democracies, by the way, it's not only against democracies. I mean, you can use the same tools, the same methods also against non-democratic states. But we, of course, we are much more worried about democracies. If you think about using it against the democracies, it is usually attacking trust. Trust, not only trust between people, between organizations, between people and government, and etc., but also trust almost in everything. I mean, you don't believe anymore, you don't distinguish what is really a fact, what is not a fact, what is what we call today fake news or deep fake if it comes to video clips, etc. And it's attacking directly trust, and in this way it is touching the basics of democracies. I mean, we all go once in 4 years and vote, and then we trust the government to do nice things. I mean, not using the force that we give them for changing the system or something like this. But if you think about it, it really attack more fundamentally democracies because certain tools of democracies become questionable. You take, for example, a very simple example. In democracies, we use parties, okay? We vote for this party or that party. And why do we need a party? It's very simple, because one person that would like to be the prime minister or president or cannot really deliver the message to hundreds of millions of people if it's a big state, or to millions if it's a small state. So there is a party, he speaks with a group of few hundreds, usually few hundred people. Each one of them is speaking with other few hundred people. At the end of the day, the message is delivered to the masses. It started not being so with mass media, let's say 100 years ago or so. But mass media could then, at that time, be used only by those who rule, and not those who would like to be elected. But today, with one tweet, or now we have to change the name, one X, you can reach 80 million people or something like this with one push of a button, and you don't need anymore the party. Instead of the leaders going down to the masses, tell them who to vote for, it comes the other way around. I mean, you reach directly the people, and they would ask the leaders to vote for this guy or that guy, okay? And the whole system of democracy becomes questionable, okay? And if you think that I'm speaking about some theory or, I don't know, imagined situation, it already happened, may happen again recently in the US, and it's not fiction. This is a real issue. And this is something, I mean, I can give you a lot of examples like this. The question, of course, and I'll talk about it in a minute, question is what we can do in order to fight against it, to prevent it. Now, if the whole idea here is that once we develop this, I mean, computer technology is, of course, the dominant technology of our, let's say, last 50 years or so. It expands it runs very fast, changes very fast. And we do develop it in order to make our life better, faster, more efficient, etc. We tend to forget that by doing it, we become more and more dependent on computers. And by being more dependent on computers, we become more vulnerable to bad guys. And there are always bad guys. And when I say bad guys, I mean not only, of course, hostile governments or something like this, but also sometimes organizations, sometimes ideological groups, sometimes criminals only for their own sake, etc. I mean, coming to Taiwan, I don't have to tell you about the concept of yin and yang, but this is the case here too. I mean, the bright side of technology is what we call computer technology, and the dark side of the same technology is, for example, this information warfare that can hurt, damage the stability of the whole democratic system, as I just said. This is a lesson we have to remember. And if I'm coming from Israel, I mean, in Israel, I don't know how much you know about Israel, but because of this, we decided in 2011, this was 10 years ago, to take the whole issue of cyber technology from the hands of intelligence and defense. I mean, I guess you know that intelligence and defense organizations are dealing with cyber technology for 40 years now, more than 40 years, okay? This is not a new thing. But it was done secretly. It was considered to be very sensitive. And until 2010, 11, more or less, in Israel, people don't believe it when I say it, but in 2011, you couldn't find even one university over the globe, neither in Taiwan or in Israel, nor in anywhere else, in which you could go and study cybersecurity. It sounds like Middle Ages, but this was the case only almost 10 years ago, okay? We decided to take it from the hands of military intelligence organizations and make it legitimate for every field in our life. This is, I always say we have not invented cyber technology, but we were the first to come out of the closet, to make it legitimate, to admit it, to write papers. Publishing papers is, you know, the enemy is also reading, etc. And especially because we started having this feeling that as a democracy and technological democracy, as Israel is, also Taiwan, by the way, we are more vulnerable than our rivals. Okay? If you live in the third world and you still run infrastructure manually, you are not controlled by computers, you are much less vulnerable, less efficient as well, less productive, but much less vulnerable. This is the message here. And then we decided we should come out of the closet, make it legitimate, including having every university in Israel has a research center doing two things that universities are doing, teaching and researching, publishing papers, no secrecy anymore, no sensitivity, nothing, okay? We started doing it. I mean, I had the honor of submitting a plan to the government of Israel how to make Israel one of the top countries in the world in cybersecurity in 2010. We started doing it with all the fields. And then we realized it's not, I mean, you cannot really start with universities. The whole issue is about human beings, human values. What is democracy? I mean, it's not human living in democracies and human living in totalitarian regimes are the same people, okay? Same creature. Still, sometimes the values are different, sometimes the priorities are different, the power of the government is different, things like this. In order to strengthen this, you have to deal with educating people. I mean, I've already said that information warfare and fake news, etc., is a very old activity of human beings, okay? The solutions are also very old. I mean, human beings learned how to deal with it before it became so massive by education, not by technology, but by educating people certain values, certain encouraging critical thinking, checking facts, and things like this. The good news here is that by using technology, we can find certain partial solutions. I mean, not ignoring education. We should still do make our main effort in education, but we can use also the technology itself, artificial intelligence and things like this, to help us fix those problems, okay? We human beings have a lot of biases. It's very, I mean, you can identify it, but it's very difficult to fix it because it goes, you know, culture can be changed, but culture is very slow to be changed. I mean, it's a slow process. The whole idea of a successful campaign against democracies, etc., is using the biases of the audience. I mean, talking the right language to those you would like to influence, and even if you know it, it's difficult to change it. But those misinformation, disinformation, fake news, God knows what, were designed to deceive human psychology, human beings. Not so easy, they can do the same to machines that were designated to find those. I mean, I look at, I got a fake, what we call deep fake. I got a New Year blessing from the president of the US, speaking Hebrew better than me. Of course, he doesn't know a word in Hebrew, but the machine, I mean, I looked at it and I tried to find what is the problem here. Maybe the lips are not moving, nothing. I mean, my brain was fully deceived. The only thing I knew is that he doesn't know Hebrew, okay? And he doesn't know me, so why should he send me this blessing? But it can easily be detected by technology. The same technology that the bad guys are using in order to influence us, then same technology can be used in order to detect fake or deep fake, in this case, video clips that looks like real. It looks like real for human brain, not for another machine using artificial intelligence that were trained to find fake clips, deep fake clips like this. Still, the main thing we have to do is the traditional things. It's critical thinking and freedom of. It's not freedom of opinion or speech. Freedom to check, to analyze and check. Words like transparency, etc., that we all use become more important than they were before. But this time it can be helped also by technology itself. Thank you.
Thank you, Director. Yeah. I like it very much you use the concept of yin-yang, talking about the internet technology. We should definitely talk more about how we can include technology as part of the solution when we talk about this problem. And also we hear from you the thinking behind the strategy, national strategy on cybersecurity in the past 2 decades. We also hear about the role and importance of education in your experience. Thank you for your sharing. And now let's welcome our next speaker, Professor Jakub Buczak. She's not only a professor at the school, she also had advised European Parliament on security and defense, foreign policy, innovation and energy, as well as development in the year of 2007 to 2014. She's also the chair of Strengthening the Resilience of State and Society panel in the Defense 24 Days at National Stadium on Resilience this year. Let's welcome Professor Jakub Buczak.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you so much for allocating this time of yours to share it with us. I cannot express my excitement to be here and feel very free to share my opinions in such a nice and safe environment where we share so many common beliefs. It's very easy to really speak and share the effects of my work that I've been conducting for many, many years. And I would very much agree with every word that the professor said, that this is very important, and the heuristical aspect of being a human, it's connected to many biases, and this is a vulnerability that is being exploited. And we can not only be afraid of the artificial intelligence, machine learning, creating this kind of content, but we can also use it, as Professor said. So in my short expose, will be focusing more about the impact of the war in Ukraine and other very disturbing phenomena that are taking place in Eastern Europe. So first of all, I would like to say that gray zone tactics and hybrid activities, hybrid warfare, it's becoming more and more popular due to the fact that was addressed in many times in the first panel, the availability and attractiveness from the economical point of view. Because not only, as Professor said, it's much easier now to conduct hybrid activities with the respect to cognitive or psychological informational warfare, but it's less costly. Before, let's say in Middle Ages, you had to have army of people that only very wealthy people can employ and send them, wait many months for the information to spread. Now, as Professor said, you can just push one button and employ the army of bots, and they will do the work. And there are farms of bots, you know, spreading the misinformation or disinformation that are used by the state and non-state actors, and at very little cost, especially bearing in mind on how much money the non-democratic regimes make and how much of human resource they can involve. It's much easier for non-democratic regimes to influence us. And here, I would like to raise first question: where should we put the border between two very important human rights, the right to security and our very beloved right to freedom? Because we are at a very different page when it comes to the right to freedom as democracies in comparison to non-democratic regimes. So this would be my first question. And if somebody can answer, that I would be very thankful. And so due to the attractiveness related to economical aspect and also difficulties with verifying who is behind certain attack, cyber attack or informational warfare attack, I believe that the hybrid warfare, hybrid activities, maybe not hybrid warfare, but hybrid activities will become more and more popular. And that's why we have to, as Professor said, focus on education, raising awareness. And I believe it's not something that we can achieve in 1 year, 5 years, but this might need maybe even a generation, unless we really take advantage of the AI and engage it as a tool to help us with verifying what kind of information is beneficial for democracies, what kind of information is destructive. So this cognitive warfare is especially disturbing because it's not only about spreading a fear and spreading the disinformation, but the main aspect is to have a certain reaction. So to make society reactive, to control them, the people are being reactive, they are spending their energy on reactions instead of being active. And this way, we can fully control them, even though we are on a different continent and we wouldn't have this opportunity before. And there is a famous musician, and I would like to buy a drink to somebody that would tell me the name, that is the author of the citation I'm going to use now. Whoever controls media controls the mind. So I believe this is very true. And as Professor said, mass media, very young in comparison to the informational warfare on a historic scale. And now imagine we're talking about social media. So as Professor again said, everybody with certain resources, or either access to people or financial resources, can influence on a very large scale. And so now, what is media? How we can make it something valuable for the people that are having relation through media, through social media. What is true, what is false, how to verify what is a deep fake, what is true. And for instance, I wanted to tell you what's going on in Poland right now, what has been going on within the last few years with the respect to our eastern border that we share as a European Union with Belarus, acting as a proxy of Russian Federation. There are people being invited as a tourist by the regime of Lukashenko, and it's been orchestrated that travel agencies bring in thousands of people from all over the world, like as the countries as exotic to Poland as Cuba. Those people are being promised that they can come to do sightseeing in Minsk, and as a result end up living in Berlin, in Germany. And it has been orchestrated last year, just this year, the Polish border guard reported over 16,000 cases where people were trying to cross the border illegally. And this is the case of weaponization of using migrants within the framework of hybrid activities. So why am I talking about it when it comes to informational cognitive warfare? There is a big discussion about it. Majority of media is presenting the situation this way. Those people are refugees. They are mothers with little children, starving and dying in the forest, and Polish border guards are not letting them in. Let them in. Everybody that comes at the border should cross. And then I'm asking, we just had this influx of migrants. We're talking about millions of people coming to Poland because of the war in Ukraine. And for some reason, they could line up and wait for days to legally cross borders, although they knew that the Russians were approaching. And there were really many women and children, elder people. I've seen them. I didn't go to the border, but I was at the train station. And that's correct. And here we have several thousands of people demanding to be allowed to illegally cross the border, and media spreading this information, Polish media, saying that yes, we should let them in. And maybe from the moral side, the first impression would be, yeah, everybody, every person is the same. We should accommodate every need, especially when they are refugees. But how we can address their needs if we don't know who they are, if they demand to cross the border illegally, and who really needs them to cross the border? Do they themselves really want to cross the border? Or maybe they're victims of human trafficking. Maybe there will be organ harvesting. Maybe we would allow, by letting them in illegally, to spend the rest of their lives as slaves. Is that what we wanted to do? Nobody talks about it when it comes to media. They only spread this disinformation that, yeah, Poland is not understanding the migration crisis, and Poland is not sensitive enough from the moral side to let those people leave. But I've been migrant in 12 countries legally, and I know how difficult it is to find your way with the respect to administration. Being granted the work permit, study permit, but I cannot imagine being alone in a country that has a foreign culture, foreign language, and I'm there illegally, you know. That would be very challenging. So I don't understand why media are calling us as Poles to allow this big influx of people to enter the European Union and end up, I don't know, as slaves, donors of the organs, or maybe mafia members. And so this is just some insight from the Polish aspect. And just shortly, I would like to address the issues related to resilience. This is the social media that is also spreading this information about the migrants. But the use of social media by children and teenagers, if you ever exposed yourself to the content that is on a social media, you would understand how low quality of a content is there, promoting only consumerism, a competition, and wasting time on some kind of activities I don't want to mention here. But also many people end up depressed because the content created there is false. Nobody looks in a real life like they do on Instagram. Nobody is always very happy and only have pleasures in their lives. And if somebody is spending the majority of the time scrolling the internet, then the more exposure you have to this false reality of social media, the more you believe that your life is somehow wrong. So people that are becoming more and more depressed, addicted to this content scrolling related to the release of the dopamine, how those people will be able to become part of civil society, how they can create a resilient society when it comes to real threats. And so I think Those are the two things that I would like to mention. I also wanted to talk about the artificial intelligence, but I'm sure that can be raised during the question time. And also, I would like to take this opportunity and really praise what has been done from the side of Taiwan, in meaning the Ministry of Digital Affairs, how Taiwan is addressing the aspects of resilience with that respect. And MODA provides the public with the necessary tools to fend off disinformation and grow awareness that the fight against fake news relies on everyone's effort. So this radical inclusion, it's very, very important, and I believe MODA can be used as an example in other countries that are under current threat when it comes to cognitive warfare or cognitive warfare activities. And especially the involvement of the new technologies like the blockchain should be taken under consideration. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you for giving us more details on the case of the so-called migrant crisis in Poland and then the role of media or different influencers on reporting this. Next, we will have another speaker also from a country standing at the front line of the ongoing warfare in Ukraine. Let's welcome Member of Parliament of Lithuania, Mr. Zmeska.
Thank you very much, and Your Excellency, Chairman Tan Sun-chin, friends in Taiwan, Taiwanese friends, and distinguished guests. I prepared my speech today about gray zone tactics on democracy in our Baltic region, in Lithuania. But first of all, may I thank you for the opportunity to participate in this forum. The first time I'm here in Taiwan, and that this forum takes place in Democratic and Independent Republic of China on wonderful island of Taiwan. And geopolitically, my country, Lithuania, has always been a special place on the map. It was and still a bridge between authoritarian regimes in the East and democratic West. Having experienced communist occupation on brutal oppression of the past, today Lithuania shows rapid progress and is a growing democratic state whose voice increasingly listened to by Western European leaders, especially in the current context of the Russian war against Ukraine. The current Russian government sees Lithuania as a near abroad, definition they use, near abroad, and as a territory that must be maintained under Russia's influence. Consequently, Russia's various institutions work hard in Lithuania to cultivate an audience that welcomes the historical and political narrative purposely shaped and supported by Russia. By spreading propaganda, terroristic state Russia seeks to portray itself as much better and more credible alternative to the democratic West, including both Europe and United States. The terroristic state Russia government attached great importance to its policy on history, namely the consolidation of historical memory that serves Russians' needs. For implementing this policy in Lithuania and other foreign countries, Russia resorts to increasingly aggressive methods. Most of the pro-Russian propaganda is generated in Russia and disseminated in the Russian language through Kremlin-controlled media and influencers, dependent on Russian authorities. Although the initiators and managers of propaganda channels targeted at Lithuania are on constant and managers of propaganda, constant lookout for opportunities to cooperate with Lithuanian journalists with Lithuania. Such working contacts are difficult to establish due to poor reputation of pro-Russian information products. only marginal Lithuanian media outlets cooperate with pro-Russian channels systematically and repeat their propaganda. Another important tool that Russia employs to make informational impact are international events initiated by Russian authorities and Kremlin-dependent non-governmental organizations, companies, or business associations. In some cases, attempts are made to conceal the Kremlin links with events by organizing events in European Union countries. For example, companies and associations operating in EU member states yet associated with oligarch Yevgeny Prigozhin, supporter of the regime in Kremlin, organized a remote discussion on the problems on the Baltic Sea region in early 2021 and invited Lithuanian politicians and diplomats to attend. Similar tactic for generating information impact is faking the significance of an event to making use of the international recognized organization. To create a strong image of the event, the Kremlin often uses the events of the organization for security and cooperation in Europe, an organization that Russia is member of, to ostensibly defend the rights of Lithuanian Russian speakers who are allegedly prosecuted. These events serve as a platform to disseminate false information and attract people who can support Russia's interests. Thus, soft power, definition soft power, you're familiar with that, is used during various scientific, cultural, and I would like to underline sports events as well. Lithuania has not been under such strong pressure from authoritarian states for a long time. In particular, the migration crisis, Veronica mentioned about it, in Poland, in Lithuania, and Latvia, orchestrated by Belarusian regime and supported by Russia, of course, was a huge challenge for our small country as well. The political stance of Minsk as Russia's satellite demonstrates its willingness to further increase the tensions with Lithuania and the West. Lithuania is one of the main immigration destinations for Russian opposition activists. There are several hundreds of asylum seekers residing in Lithuania who are fighting for the freedom of speech in Russia. As a result, the Russian intelligence services are interested in information about the members of the Russian opposition residing in Lithuania, as well as their representative organization. The Russian intelligence service may also seek to infiltrate agents into the Russian opposition organization operating in our country, in Lithuania. Since the beginning of a political crisis in Belarus 2020, Lithuania has become one of the hubs for Belarusian political opposition as well. I think you know the president of Belarus resides in Lithuania. The activities of Belarusian intelligence service in Lithuania have also been on the increases since then. The work of Belarusian intelligence services is not limited to intelligence gathering. They are increasingly aggressive against opponents of the Belarusian regime, both at home and abroad. As a cooperation between Russian and Belarusian propagandists has identified marginal pro-Kremlin political activists holding the citizenship of the Republic of Lithuania began voicing and submitting comments on matters associated with Lithuanian and Belarusian media. These individuals had been previously used for this purpose for a number of years in the Russian propaganda. It has to be noted that Lithuania has banned the rebroadcasts of Russian and Belarusian television and radio channel on its territory and has denied access to representatives of Russian and Belarusian culture, sports, and other spheres who may have an adverse influence on the country. That was very important decision to stop this rebroadcasting, because in Lithuania we have a lot of people who can understand and speak Russian, so this propaganda we can't spread anymore. So there are several dozen Lithuanian resistants who are actively spreading propaganda consistent with Russian ideology with on various communication platforms. Some of them begin spreading their ideological attitudes in public places and in protest and create hostile community. Nevertheless, the propaganda spread by Russia and other countries has no significant impact on Lithuanian politics and society. First of all, propaganda is easily recognizable and referred to as such in Lithuania. Journalists and public organizations put every effort into exposing the real source of propaganda messages and rebutting the fake news disseminated in the country. As a result, Lithuanian society has developed a sense of natural resistance and a kind of immunity to propaganda, especially to its pro-Russian version. Despite the sources provided by Russia for the purpose, the number of visitors of Kremlin propaganda portals in Lithuania remains low compared to the number of visitors of the most popular Lithuanian online media. Lithuanian media categorically refused to cooperate with Russian and Belarusian propagandists. Fake news detectors have been installed in all media outlets. In brief, the most important factor in mitigating information threats to Lithuania are the resilient civil society, zero tolerance to propaganda in the public sphere, and the opportunity offered by the freedom of speech to choose between a range of information sources. In summary, Lithuania, like Taiwan, face very similar challenges. We fight for and protect the same democratic values. Therefore, our close cooperation and support for each other are especially important in the view of geopolitical situation. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Mr. Zemeska. We heard various tactics from Russia attacking Lithuania for example, in the media landscape, and also some intelligence activity or some soft power, including culture and sports. I'm really impressed by the local media's efforts in Lithuania, countering all this attack from Russia. And as a former journalist here, I want to repeat again from your experience what kind of concrete step we can learn from your speech. I would think many of us would be interesting to think or to know what kind of step we can take. Mr. Zemeska shared that we should expose the real source of propaganda messages and rebutting the fake news dissemination in our country. And also, they did have fake news detector in different media organizations, and we should have zero tolerance to propaganda in our public sphere, and we should also keep the opportunity offered by the freedom of speech to choose between a range of information sources. I think those insights are really helpful for us, and we'll be looking forward to hear more from you. Thank you again. And next we will have Mrs. Bao-Yi Li. Before her time at the American Enterprise Institute, Ms. Brown was also the director of Modern Deterrence Project and then Senior Research Fellow at Royal United Service Institute of UK. So let's welcome Mrs. Brown.
Thank you. It's such a pleasure to be here. I work on gray zone aggression, which my son summarizes as you think about everything that can go wrong, which is really what gray zone aggression is, because it can hit anywhere using any tool. And as liberal democracies, free and open societies, we really are extremely vulnerable. And no country knows that better than Taiwan. So I am humbled to be here because you have made so much experience with gray zone aggression. And I just reminded myself here of various ways in which Taiwan has been hit by gray zone aggression. Just a couple of highlights. The undersea cables that were cut recently, classic example of gray zone aggression where it caused massive disruption to the poor residents on the Matsu Islands and really an extreme inconvenience to their daily lives, but yet very hard to ascertain who really did it and who was behind it. What was clear was that it caused massive disruption and inconvenience, and that is really the nature of grey zone aggression. The effect is clear, but it's very hard for the targeted country to ascertain without or with complete certainty who did it, and as a result it's also very difficult to retaliate against. Another example, the inspection flotilla, another really classic case of grey zone aggression, which unfortunately didn't get as much attention as the military exercises that the PRC staged at the same time, but the inspection flotilla was really a brilliant case of grey zone aggression because there they were, those vessels, not military vessels, so it wasn't clear how anybody should respond, but what they could do and may do again is of course to completely disrupt shipping by boarding ships in the Taiwan Strait, which will of course send a message to the global shipping community that it's a bad idea to sail through the Taiwan Strait because you may get stuck, and that's something that is extremely inconvenient and in fact loss-making to the international business or the international shipping community, and as a result to the international business community. But these are just a couple of examples, and you all from Taiwan know very well what some of the other examples are. But the thing about grey zone aggression is it can be, it's the only limitation there is the imagination of the perpetrator. So the perpetrator has free reins to think up whatever they like. It's obviously usually an autocratic regime, so they can think up weaponization of migrants, they can think up some sort of blockade, they can think up obviously disinformation, cyber and so forth, but it really is, in fact they can think up aviation piracy, which is what Belarus did before it thought up the weaponization of migrants. And so that may make liberal democracies depressed, because how can you possibly defend yourself against something that you can't predict? You don't know when it will hit, you don't know what will hit you, and you don't know in what manner it will hit you and who will be behind it. And that makes it so different from military aggression, where thanks to signals intelligence and so forth, you have a good understanding of what the likely perpetrator, what sort of capabilities they have, where they are, what they are planning. You can even see them move. You can't do that with grey zone aggression, because really it can be anything, anywhere. And that really raises the question of how to deter it, because you can't deter it by punishment. If you don't know what it is that you're trying to punish, you can't punish it. But the good news here, which is why I think we should not be depressed, is that we can focus instead of deterrence by denial, namely through societal resilience. The fantastic advantage that we have in our countries is that in free and liberal societies, free and open societies, liberal democracies, is that people like their countries. They like living in their countries, and they wouldn't want their country to suffer or to become impeded in any way. We like life in our societies. It's a good life. And that is a reason for us all to participate in keeping our societies safe. And that includes anything from disinformation, keeping it safe from anything from disinformation to whatever it is the other side thinks up next. And that could be, for example, what Russia did just before the invasion of Ukraine. And frankly, I thought that Russia would stay at that stage. And that stage was that it signaled to the whole world and to the Ukrainians that it was going to invade. And as a result of that, the global business community panicked, withdrew investments from Ukraine. The Ukrainian currency value plummeted. It became very expensive to insure against a Ukrainian sovereign default. The Ukrainian economy really went into the basement as a result of this threat alone. And that shows what another country can do. Now, Taiwan, of course, has a much more resilient and much stronger, much more mature economy than Ukraine does. But nevertheless, you can harm another country's economy simply by threatening to impose various kinds of harm, and that sort of harm is whatever you think up. But again, we have the advantage in free and open societies, liberal democracies, that we all like to live in our countries and we want them to prosper. And that means that actually all parts of society have an interest in being part of societal resilience against grey zone aggression. And a good example of that comes from Ireland. Now, who remembers the Irish fishermen, was it 18 months ago? That was a classic case. If you haven't heard about them, you should read up about them, but I will give you the summary now. So Russia decided about 18 months ago, or actually it was 2 years ago, because it was before the war, that it was going to hold a naval exercise off the coast of Ireland. And the Irish government pleaded with the Russian government not to hold this naval exercise there. And the Russians said, well, who are you? We're going to hold this exercise anyway. So what do you do then as the Irish government? You just sit down and say, oh, tough luck. We can't do anything. The Irish fishermen then stepped in. Irish fishermen fish off the coast of Ireland, and if the Russians were to hold a naval exercise off the coast of Ireland, Irish fishermen wouldn't be able to fish off the coast of Ireland, meaning they would lose their livelihood for that period of time and longer, because the exercise would harm marine wildlife. So Irish fishermen went to work and sailed out off the coast of Ireland and parked their ships there, and they took turns so that when the first relay team had done a certain number of hours, the second team stepped in, and then the third team, which meant that those waters were always full of Irish fishermen, and international rules, maritime rules are such that you are not allowed to engage in any sort of military activity if there are civilian ships that can be hurt while you are doing it. And the Irish fishermen just stayed in those waters off the coast of Ireland, which meant that the Russian Navy had to go home without having conducted its exercise. How brilliant is that? And I can tell you the Irish government hadn't thought of consulting Irish fishermen. It should have, because they had a solution that none of these well-educated people in the Irish Ministry of Defense, the Irish Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and in the Irish Interior Ministry, none of them had thought of it. And this is a perfect illustration of the innovation, the mental capacity, the good ideas that are out there in society. If we just harness it, it's not just governments that should be in charge of creating societal resilience. Who knows what kind of ideas are available in the rest of society? It's just so happened that Irish fishermen presented a good idea and executed it. But who knows where else there are good ideas? Among teenagers, I bet you anything teenagers have good ideas of how to counter grey zone aggression. We just have to invite them to some sort of regular forum where they can present ideas, ideally if presented with a hypothetical scenario. Retired people who have lots of ideas of how to operate machinery that's not digital, which is what we need in case of cyber attacks. All of that, and we can do that not just because they have the innovation, they have the ideas, they have the expertise, but because it's in their interest. And so I think this is what we should take away from grey zone aggression. It's not just a depressing subject. It's an opportunity for our government to invite the rest of society, including the business community, by the way, to come up with ideas and be part of the solution. And on that note, regarding the business community, the strong business community in Taiwan is one of your country's strengths. And of course, that's why the PRC wants to harm it. I think you could demonstrate strength by bringing business leaders together, conducting grey zone exercises, and indeed inviting foreign business leaders to be part of grey zone exercises, where you demonstrate that you will be able to keep the economy going, even if China, PRC, comes up with some trick like the Russians did with Ukraine that scared international investors and money markets away. So with that, my 10 minutes are up. Thank you. And if you have any questions, I'll be available afterwards.
Thank you so much. It's a very intense 10 minutes. Thank you so much for sharing all this. We heard from you that the difficulty when we're facing this kind of creative gray zone tactic as well. You share some examples, but also you're very kind to provide us some good news and some good case studies that we can work on together. I think it's perfect that following your sharing, we will hear from Dr. Puma Shen. I think from the sharing from Mrs. Brown, we heard the importance of how a society could be strong if they are holding together and if they want to fight for their own countries. And from Puma's various project, we can hear more details about that in Taiwan and your observation in our society. Let's welcome Puma Shen.
Thanks. So thanks for having me today. So we're here to talk about, to unravel the complex web of the cognitive warfare, information warfare, gray zone tactics. And my focus will be on the democratic fabric, especially within Taiwan, since we're here in Taiwan, and want to talk about China. So the ramifications of this cognitive warfare on democracy are significant, to say at least. And in Taiwan, where social divisions already exist, the infusion of conspiracy theories and false information can have profound effects. But is this influence overstated or underrated? Understanding this question is a complex task and it requires a multifaceted approach. So given Taiwan's unique position, it becomes a natural target for such tactics. The societal divisions are sometimes rooted in historical, cultural, and political factors. So exploiting these divides becomes a central strategy in cognitive warfare. But to understand the extent of it, to measuring the extent of cognitive warfare is the first step. To gauge the effect, we must first measure the extent of cognitive warfare right now here in Taiwan. And let me share a vivid example. So during the pandemic, when Taiwan escalated to level 3 alert, China created 8 YouTube channels, amassing 30 million view counts over 3 months before being removed. And in a 3-month analysis of 300,000 Facebook articles on vaccines, I found that like more than 30% were about Chinese products. So this volume isn't something easily fabricated. And from this perspective, China's influence is enormous. And these numbers were not just like statistics. They represent real people, real views, and real influence. We must ponder the ripple effects these channels create in shaping public opinion. And China is known to employ strategy that includes sharing short articles, videos, and promoting propaganda through machine-like sharing tactics. And these methods are actually considered by some to be more dangerous than the activities of trolls and patriots. While the latter, the trolls and patriots, may be seen as falling within the scope of free speech, often creating only small echo chambers. The former, the machine-like, the bots, particularly the use of bots, can be more insidious. The automated and widespread dissemination of specific messages and ideologies has the potential to influence and even brainwash individuals over the long term. And this orchestrated approach, devoid of human reasoning and debate, can have enormous impacts on public opinion and social dynamics, surpassing traditional forms of influence and potentially undermining democratic principles. So this cognitive warfare is more than just creating content. The strategic spread of disinformation, targeting of specific demographics, and manipulation of narratives are all part of a large, well-orchestrated campaign. A large volume doesn't necessarily lead to substantial impact. So all this Chinese content might go unnoticed or to be dismissed, rendering it meaningless. So we must understand that the cognitive warfare comprises 2 elements: the conspiracy theories, which may be biased interpretations, and false information, which can be scientifically debunked. So differentiating the false information and conspiracy theories could be very crucial here. The false information and conspiracy theories operated on different principles. Understanding these differences is critical for developing an effective response. The differentiation between something being widely believed but false and the narrow but more dangerous conspiracy is vital. So what I mean is that while false information becomes more dangerous as it spreads wider, conspiracy theories are more dangerous when spread narrower. So to gauge the number of people affected, we must distinguish whether we are discussing false information or conspiracy theories. Often cognitive warfare, especially the one from China, focuses on less than 10% of the population. Underestimating the effectiveness of this kind of conspiracy theories reflects a lack of understanding of cognitive warfare tactics. So here in Taiwan, about 20 to 25% would surrender if the war broke out, but while 50 to 60% would resist. China often targets the uncertain 20%. So by shifting different topics on targeting smaller percentage, reaching the 20%, the threshold isn't challenging. So this approach resembles the boiling frog strategy. So in some of the experiments I conducted, I found that those without a political stance, or those who despise the partisan politics in Taiwan, were more easily influenced by Chinese conspiracy theories, and particularly those that are anti-US. And by switching all these topics and targeting smaller percentage, this piecemeal approach can slowly alter public opinion without raising any alarm. And this micro-targeting tactics employed by China towards Taiwan could be seen as more serious than in other countries, as China actively seeks to gather personal data in Taiwan through various means. First, they may utilize the VPN services to access and collect information. As you may know, they try to acquire lots of VPN companies recently. A method that is further accentuated by the Chinese ownership of more and more mobile games known to harvest the data. And additionally, popular platforms such as TikTok and WeChat, widely used by Taiwanese citizens, provide another venue for data collection. And these concerted efforts highlight the extent of Chinese interest in and reach into Taiwan's digital landscape. And the situation becomes even more concerning with the involvement of the United Front Work Department, a Chinese Communist Party agency known for its influence and information gathering operations. This organization adds another layer of complexity and urgency to the issue of micro-targeting here in Taiwan, as it actively seeks to promote Chinese political agenda and exert control over various spheres of influence. And like I say, less than 10% of the citizens in different areas here in Taiwan. So using all this data collection and manipulation as the key tools in its strategy. So United Front Work similarly targets the small groups. Understanding this tactic through often overlooked is vital for national security. In Taiwan, many local communities leaders, we call it Lijang, right, are involved in United Front Work groups and influenced by China. When organizing events in Taiwan, they sometimes tell the local people, our citizens, that China treats us pretty well, even giving us the fitness equipment, to have you to do some exercise. So they argue that it's unlikely China would attack Taiwan unless they would not give us some sort of fitness equipment, right? And they ask people not to believe the government or not to demonize China. So, through various experiments, we also found out that certain demographics here in Taiwan were more susceptible, more vulnerable to Chinese conspiracy theories. Some of them are more than 65 years old, but lots of them are from age 20 to 29. So these findings guide us, our approach to counter such influence. So attempts to reduce the belief in conspiracy theories through various methods, actually here in Taiwan, have proven ineffective. So modern society and its pressures provide fertile ground for all these theories. So personally, I'm very pessimistic about resolving all these issues. So a lot of methods like exposing false information, like altering algorithms, or even show the true stories under all these fake news, have not successfully reduced the belief in conspiracy theories right now here in Taiwan. And as I talk to a younger generation, when I say, hey, this is the piece of disinformation coming from the PLA or coming from the United Front Work Department, the response I got is like, if I could watch Hollywood movie, if I could watch Japanese anime, why can't I read Chinese messages? You know? So sometimes this is not unique to Taiwan, but a global issue, as modern society provides a fertile ground for all these theories to thrive. So I would say that because I still work in the university, I still believe in media literacy, but the thing is that we need 50 years or even 100 years to have media literacy to be built upon, I mean, within our society. But maybe we only have 5 years, even 3 years, or even 3 days, right? Right now here in Taiwan. So emphasizing all this transparency with media literacy to understanding our adversary is still paramount. And focusing on education media literacy to strengthen our society resilience could be part of the broader strategy, but we need to do more. So the cognitive warfare, the information warfare, or any gray zone tactics present the formidable challenges to our democracy. In Taiwan's context, these challenges become even more pronounced. And understanding the nuances, differentiating between different elements, focusing on transparency, awareness are crucial. Collaborative efforts among governments, tech companies, and citizens, and civil society, of course, must be fortified to build a resilient defense. So the path ahead may be fraught with obstacles, but with concerted efforts, awareness, and strategic approach, I think we can still mitigate the impacts of these insidious tactics. But still, there are lots of things needs to be done, and I think that ends my short presentation. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you, Professor Chen. I don't want to occupy too much time. Now we have only 20 minutes left for this panel, and I know there will be lots of questions on the topics. It's really relevant to our current topic, so if you have any question now, it is your chance to raise your hand, and the microphone will go to you. There will be 2 questions here, the third one, 4th, and 5th, and 6th, okay.
Good afternoon. Is this on? Yes. Good afternoon. I'm Shani Perez Chen with the UK think tank, the Institute for Statecraft. I'm a Spanish-based analyst on China's propaganda and disinformation. And my question is for Professor Jakubowicz. You talk on your presentation, you mainly talk about how disinformation campaigns, one of the main objectives is to provoke in the public reactive behaviors instead of proactive. But you mainly refer to the public, and I would like to ask you, what about those this propaganda on disinformation aimed at elites? At our political elites, our judicial elites, our academic elites. And if I may present an example of what happened in Spain where China's propaganda is deeply rooted because it's been running unchecked for decades. And back in 2017, Spain decided to extradite 300 Taiwanese to China, becoming the first Western country and only Western country to have done so. And when I was reading the rulings of the National Court on this matter, there was a paragraph there it was stated that the majority of countries accept that the One China principle, meaning Taiwan is part of the People's Republic of China, with a government who legislates and decides its affairs in the name of the PRC government. Meaning that when Taiwan legislates to extend conscription, is doing so in the name of China, the same country, the same government who is attacking Taiwan.
Yeah.
And this is part of Spain jurisdiction, and it's ingrained in Spain's jurisdiction, and I think really troublesome. Yeah. So, what can we do to fight against this institutionalized disinformation?
Thank you. Thank you for your sharing from the experience of Spain. Yeah, we haven't talked about the role of elite in different countries, how they are impacted by Chinese propaganda. So maybe some of the panelists want to have your answers to the question right now? Yeah.
So very briefly, I was just writing about the Spanish judiciary. So I think it's, as in many other countries, there is a lot of room for improvement. And of course, non-democratic countries, to be brief, they have one big advantage, especially for the people that don't have any higher moral values. They have a lot of wealth, financial wealth. So of course they can also influence politicians and elites. And this is what is happening in Europe with respect to Russia. You know, that's why we have war in Ukraine, because so much of wealth generated from stealing from Russian nation, from the peoples of Russia, it's been invested in European Union, and we've been blinded by the money we can make on this. So this is a very broad topic, and I'm very happy to answer, elaborate on email, and I think it's a great subject to make another event or a conference, because it's very broad. Thank you so much.
Do you have any other feedback or thoughts, sharings from other panelists on the role of elite? Not yet? Okay. Here we have 2 questions here.
Thank you for all the distinguished panelists here. And I have an open question for all of you, because there's a catchphrase in Taiwanese politics. It's called skepticism of U.S. commitment to Taiwan's defense. And basically means that this is a narrative saying that U.S. will not come to Taiwan's help when there's a war between Taiwan and the PRC. But I believe that this is not exclusive to Taiwan. I believe that there's a universal nature in this narrative, and because all the panelists are from U.S. allies, and I would love to hear from you what's the situation there. Is there any similar narratives in your country or any other countries, and what's the solution elsewhere? Thank you.
Maybe we'll collect one more question. Thank you.
This is Raymond Song from the Prospect Foundation. I have a general question for all the speakers. You mentioned the responses to the tactics employed to counter cognitive warfare and gray zone aggression, but the area seems to be more focused on civil society initiatives like education, building resilience, or improving media literacy. Is there any particular reasons that you put emphasis in this? And you seldom mention governmental responses. I'm just wondering why. And could you give a general assessment about the effectiveness of those civil society initiatives to counter those activities? But I still have specific question. It's really a plea for elaborations to each of you. Actually, I think Professor Ben Israel, you mentioned using technology to counter technology. Could you care to elaborate more? And because as we heard from Puma, that sometimes it's not about the truthfulness of the information, it's really about the conspiracies, exercise of distortion or creating bias. How do we, using technology, to detect those? And Vilius, you mentioned fake news detectors. Is that also using certain technology, and how do you counter conspiracy problem? And Veronica, you mentioned media, and of course I, speaking from the perspective of Taiwan, we envy you, because we face not only the outside exercise, and we face media and the serious problem of agents of the Chinese government within Taiwan. Would you care to speak more about how do Poland counter of the media problem? And Elizabeth, thank you for mentioning the Irish fishermen cases. Is that of a particular reasons that they kind of have this solidarity to do this exercise as a whole? Thank you.
So I guess we will start from this side, from the director, and then each of the panelists can share your thoughts on these questions. So the role of technology, the possibility, and maybe the skepticism.
I'll try to be very brief because we don't have much time. General remark, someone asked here about how much we can rely on the US, and judging from our history, America was always there when we needed it. But still, the policy of Israel from day one is to be as much as possible, independent. I mean, we lean very much on political influence of the U.S., on supply of weapons, arms, etc. But we never needed any American real operations, American army or American military forces intervening. And of course, we pay a lot for it because you need to build the force to be independent. But this is a very general remark. No matter how much conspiracy theories are running here and there, this is a general policy remark. Now, about the AI against AI, I'll give you a small example, okay? It was mentioned here also, Edward Snowden in 2013 exposed the fact that the National Security Agency of the US, in order to protect the security of the America, not just for fun, they tried to clean the communication networks by detecting malware running in the network. And the way to do it, this was 2013, the way to do it then was to take any series of messages and go decode it, go to the content, and then you, if you find there's some malware signature, you do something. If you not, you ignore it. But then, what do you mean you ignore it? I mean, this was after you read, actually, everything that was running in the communication lines, and we speak about American citizens, not the enemy citizens, bad guys, etc. American innocent citizens. So the tension between privacy on one hand and security on the other hand surfaced, as was mentioned here too. And I was appointed to lead a committee and with the question how to deal with it. We couldn't find something to eliminate it, but at least to balance the two values. And there were many things there. One of them was, this was, as far as I know, first time in which AI, machine learning, was applied in a large scale in order to do whatever I've just mentioned. We put a machine, a computer, that learned the normal behavior of the traffic of messages without decoding it, without going to the level of content. But malware behaves in a different way than normal messages. So the machine looked at the traffic, learned the normal behavior, filtered out abnormally behaving series of bits. And this is using technology, I mean, this was 10 years ago almost, in order to protect us against things like this, as an example. Imagine yourself that whenever you open your Facebook or I don't know what social networks you use, you read something, there will be like traffic lights there. Red means the computer will tell you, I checked this story, found it suspicious, okay, red light. Or I checked this story, didn't find anything, green light. Or some orange in between. Or, this can be done. It will not eliminate the problem totally because the other side, I mean, this also happened in Israel. The other side learned that we use machine learning in order to detect the difference between this and that. So they started to use their machine learning, their AI, in order to detect how we distinguish between normal and abnormal, etc., and in order to deceive our machines. It's AI against AI, and it will go like this, I think, forever.
So it's a competition of technology.
With the respect to relying on Americans, as Poland, we also have very good experiences. Still, as a member of NATO, Article 3, building capabilities versus relying on others, Article 5. But this is another conference subject or very big book. And then when it comes to, and as opposed to European Union, although there is in the Lisbon Treaty, there is a possibility to get a backup. I personally, as a Pole specializing in security matters, I didn't feel we received sufficient support from European Union with respect to what was happening during the phases of the Ukraine war so far. We will see what the future will bring. Then when it comes to media, this is a very delicate and complex subject again. Let's do a big event on that. I think our government is doing their best. There are several initiatives focusing on state enterprises and their employees, and also the citizens in general, organized previously by the Chancellery of the Prime Minister and now by the Polish Ministry of Digital Affairs. So I can give you some examples later on. But for instance, the Demagog initiative, there is an expert kind of agency, non-government organization, but very closely cooperating with the government that is addressing this misinformation and disinformation cases. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the questions, and I myself told me every time, help yourself. It's for Lithuania the same. We have to build our capabilities. We increased our defense budget up to 2.4% of GDP. Next year will be 3% of GDP. And we have to work with our society. Everyone at home, every man can have a rifle at home and have to be ready to protect the country. And if we able to protect our country, we will get a help. But with border sharing with democratic countries, we have to show right now in Ukraine, and we have to ask all democratic countries what kind of weapons we send to Ukraine. Look, the Ukraine right now can only get weapons to defend the country, but not to win this war. We need more and more weapons sent to Ukraine to win this war. That is very important, because China and another authoritarian regimes right now looking how we'll end this war. So I hope and I believe not only small countries, neighboring countries like Lithuania, the main country like United States will provide more weapons to Ukraine, but we are waiting from South Korea as well, from Taiwan as well. That is the right time to deliver the weapons to Ukraine, because we can be the next if they lose this war. So, and very short about fake news detector have installed in Lithuania all. That is agreement between the media, the private media as well, to check the first sources. That is important. Go deep as much as possible to check the first sources. And if we have false information, all media next day or on the same day have read articles that was a false news, and so the society can learn how to detect this fake news. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'll answer your question then about why it is that there is such potential in civil society. I think it is because our armed forces are already working at capacity. They have designated duties and they have things they are very good at, but they don't have lots of capacity to do additional things, which is why it's a little bit ridiculous when things happen, like during COVID. I remember vividly in the UK, there was an urgent need for all kinds of things, including stocking supermarket shelves, and various politicians said, well, you know, we should send in the army. Well, the army is good at many things, is specialized in many things, but if we assume that the army can step in and do resilience tasks, then it won't be available to do the tasks that only the armed forces can do in a crisis. And when it comes to Irish fishermen, I think it's such a good example because they were motivated. They wanted to keep fishing. And I think all of us are motivated to keep our societies free and open. We just have to be asked. And I also, on a slightly unrelated note, but atomization and fragmentation is a big problem in our societies. We need more ways in which citizens can interact. I sing in choirs, but it's not for everybody. So if there are opportunities to do things together, if it is, for example, bringing groceries to the elderly in case of a crisis, if it is keeping the elderly company if power goes out, whatever it is, these are opportunities to demonstrate resilience and for people to do things with their fellow citizens. Thank you.
Thank you. Last but not least.
I'll be brief because I think we're
Okay. Take your time.
time is kind of up. But also back to the anti-US messages or the anti-US sentiment. So the thing is that I think to win, I mean, if our own narratives wants to like outweigh their propaganda or their narratives, we need like capitals and we need motivations. And the thing here in Taiwan is that for all these anti-US messages, there's no interest groups or like organization that had a strong interest to fight against this kind of narratives. So for example, I mean, most anti-US messages right now is all about Ukraine, saying that the US is having the biolabs over there, they're triggering the warfare, they're expanding the NATO. And all these messages has been translated into Chinese, or China is doing that. And these messages should be debunked, or should be like countered by certain groups or certain citizens here in Taiwan. But no one has that motivation, and we don't have that budget. So if no one is countering that narratives, that would be pervasive here in Taiwan. And that is how anti-US messages has been thriving here in Taiwan. And same thing for like AI technology. It's like whenever any kind, I mean, people worried about AI technology like ChatGPT to generating all these articles. But China has already using like AI technology to generating content from articles like 3 years ago. They're already doing that. Criminals are like always ahead of us. When they see ChatGPT, they're thinking about how to utilize it on scammers or in sex industry. And like us, when we use ChatGPT, we're always like, hey, who is Puma Shen? And help me like organize the 3-day trip to Hawaii. And that is how we use this kind of stuff. So it's like all this, we don't have this like motivation, or certain capital has not been invested in these studies or all these organizations. We might lose the warfare, I mean, in the long run. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you all for your sharing, and thank you all for your attention. We heard lots of concrete examples and also see lots of opportunities. And let's continue the conversation at a coffee break and maybe explore more possibility for collaboration in the future. Please join me, have a big round of applause to our wonderful panelists. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much to former advisor Liu for your moderating and all our wonderful panelists. Thank you very much. You may return to your seats.